William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.
Welcome to Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis. Patti is on the coast doing relief efforts. Josh is also being humanitarian. Doc's at home recording the show. Where's Patti today?
Patti is in New Orleans with Aaron for her birthday. Okay,
so they didn't just go to make sure their house. Do they still have that house down there, Aaron's old house?
No.
They did finally sell it?
They sold it.
Oh, okay. So they're just taking the weekend off.
Yeah.
It sounded much better. Patti's on the coast doing relief efforts. Josh is teaching a class. So it's just
us today.
It's just us today. We had guests lined up. Something probably came up. Hurricane
Harvey.
It's apparently the gay's fault.
As it is always.
Ann Coulter's stupidity was that it's because of the lesbian mayor, who's been out of office for 8 months now. She was elected 3 times, so she was mayor 6 years before that. There was no hurricane. She was comptroller for 6 years before that, and she was on the city council, elected at large citywide, usually by landslide. 6 years before that, so for 18 years, she's out of office.
Actually,
and then got decided, well, because, I've been thinking about it, I didn't have time, but I'm going to flood the city now because she was mayor.
Right. Well, actually what she tweeted was she didn't believe that Ann Coulter, she didn't believe that Anise Parker or the hurricane was caused because they had a lesbian mayor, but that's more believable than climate change. That's exactly what she said.
Because climate change has nothing to do with it. The Gulf waters have heated up more. 1 degree makes a difference. So more evaporation is caused when the waters are warmer, and more precipitation is formed, and you get a bigger storm. It's not hard to understand. I mean,
people, it is.
It's not rocket science. It's
science.
Something that's very easy to understand. We've all boiled water on our stoves. If you start with hotter water, or you start with less water because more of it is already evaporated, it boils faster.
It does.
When it boils, the water goes up into the air. From a tea kettle isn't going to form a rain cloud, but it's the same effect. It's really not hard science.
It's not hard science at all.
Okay, so
and Houston they're calling this a 500-year flood. Well, Houston has experienced 3 of these in the past 3 years.
But I don't understand the term 500-year, 1,000-year, whatever floods, because if it really is a 500-year event, okay, so we had our 500-year event a few years ago. That was for the last 500 years. Now, 10 years later, this is for the next 500 years, won't happen again, so we don't have to worry about it?
Not exactly. It's more like the likelihood. A tornado or a storm of that or flood of this magnitude should not happen for about 500 years. Or actually, the most common one is 100 years. Do you live in a 100-year floodplain?
Well, they keep calling the floods that we have that flood the Trinity River, those are 100-year floods.
Those are 100 years.
Since I've lived here, there has been one of those 100-year floods that brings the water to near the top of the levee every 10 years. It's not a 100-year flood, it's a 10-year flood.
Well, that just shows you how climate change absolutely is at work.
Those floods have been going on the Trinity River every 10 years, even if it's not climate change, if it's because the city has grown and we've put lots of cement so that water can't absorb into the soil anymore, and we've gotten rid of all the farmland. Where the studio was farmland less than 50 years ago. I remember when across from North Park, when I moved here, across from North Park was farmland.
It was.
Along Central Expressway. But it's not necessarily that. It's also the amount of rain, because we've been having these, even when Dallas was not paved over and didn't have 1 million people, when Dallas was 300,000 people, it's still got these kinds of floods about every 10 years. That's why we have the levees.
Right. Well,
so those are 10-year floods.
Yeah, I was specifically talking about Houston. Those are catastrophic floods. I grew up in Houston.
Houston, same thing. They've overbuilt a place where people shouldn't be living as densely, and it shouldn't be paved as much.
It is.
It's a floodplain.
That is part of the reason. Yep.
Now, what is interesting is, now remember when Anise was on the show, and you asked her anything gay, what's her answer? Well, Lerone, that's a very good question, and I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in that. But, we have a flooding problem south of the city, on the south side of the city around Harvey Airport, and going down I-45 to, all the way down to the coast, but Houston extends a certain number of miles past downtown, and we have a bad flooding problem here. Where was the flooding in Houston this time?
That area?
It was on the north side of the city. The two worst flooded places are not around. Harvey Airport opened, which is south of downtown, reopened faster than Intercontinental. The flooding was on the north side because this storm moved in and was so big and dumped so much rain.
But it was really bad in downtown and around the ship channel.
It was bad everywhere.
It was.
But
that's south.
But right now, the two areas that are still left flooded are up north. Well, one is north, one is west, and the one that's west that's bad is still bad because of the release of water from the overflowing reservoirs, which are on the west side. So that's kind of a man-made situation because they're man-made reservoirs, and they had to let water out. There are only about 20 to 30 homes that are affected by that. And I'm saying only, that's a lot, but that's not an entire neighborhood or section of the city. It's fairly contained, what's bad there. But what I'm saying is stop calling it a 500-year flood, because people who are climate deniers say, well, if it happens once every 500 years, it's not going to happen again for another 500 years. It could happen again next week.
It could.
Now, Irma, the next hurricane, that seems to be going, it might hit Puerto Rico, but they expect it to take a turn and go up the East Coast, possibly not even hit land. So that's not terrible. Although it could, it still could cause some flooding from some high water. It could cause some.
And I wonder if it does.
The winds could come in, cause some damage.
Which of course, everybody hope it does not hit land. But if it does, I wonder what gays up there are going to be playing for it.
Well, there are a lot of gays up there.
There are a lot of gays up there.
If it hits Massachusetts, well, they're the ones who started.
They started gay marriage. Yeah. And so who else is blamed this on?
Okay, you had one. I hadn't heard this one that you mentioned just before we went on the air.
I don't know if you've ever heard of conservative Christian. His name is Kevin Swanson.
Never heard of him.
He has a church down in Houston. Well, he says that the hurricane was caused by God because it was his punishment on Texas for not passing the bathroom bill.
Okay, well, at least he's more current. The Texas legislature just adjourned a couple of weeks ago. Takes a few days, maybe a week, for a hurricane to form. God even isn't able to just instantly cause that hurricane. Those hurricane clouds, you have to...
They had to build up.
Right. So. Have to use normal climate science and physics, but we don't like... we don't like to attribute that to God, that God might have created how it works, but I guess that's the delay. Maybe we can use it as the excuse this time. So it took a few weeks for, I guess first God had to decide to do this, because, God's not impulsive. And then we have to form the hurricane. And then we have to target just one part of the state, because I guess Houston is more responsible for that than Dallas.
Yeah, because Houston also had a gay mayor. Dallas does not.
Well, that's true. Now, here's my explanation for these stupid comments. Pastor Jeffress, who's the master of stupidity when it comes to making statements about things here in Dallas, Pastor Jeffress found that news media was ignoring him.
Oh.
Why? Because he says a lot of stupid things.
Right.
He blames people just like this for naturally occurring events, or that God is vengeful for anything that doesn't agree with what I believe in. So news media stopped going to him. The city stopped going to First Baptist Church as the first alternative. Who did they go to swear in the city council this time? Now, the swearing-in ceremony was at the Meyerson. What's the closest church to the Meyerson? Actually, that's not the closest, but it's within a few blocks. It's First Baptist Church. There actually is one that's closer, and that's not First Presbyterian.
No.
I'm not sure which church that is. It might be First Methodist, and that's closer. But they didn't go to those. Who did they go to give the benediction for the swearing in? Neil Cazares Thomas, Cathedral of Hope.
That's right.
So they not only didn't go to the obvious pastor, the one who's closest, the one who has one of the biggest congregations in the city, they went the far extreme opposite direction. Why? Well, Neil is very respected, and by the way, he's going to be on our show at the end of September. But Neil is a very respected and wonderful speaker. And Pastor Jeffress has pretty much been marginalized because of the stupid things that he's said. So what did Pastor Jeffress do in order to get more attention? He comes out with stupider and stupider things. Ann Coulter, cut from the same cloth, not religious, but again, this far-right extremist, who people have started to band together and complain to TV stations who have her on as the balance. Well, she's not the balance. She doesn't offer intelligent, I don't even want to say right-wing, but
just an opposing
mainstream Republican ideas. She doesn't do that. She comes out with these extremist, ridiculous, idiotic things. So it's the same thing with the climate change thing. You have to report the stupid along with intelligent things. And maybe it's at the point where stop reporting that she said this about, Houston, because it's more believable because Houston's mayor, whatever. Right. That's just dumb. It's hurtful. It's denying science. I'm not getting what this whole thing about denying science is, but a poll came out recently that said more Republicans think college has a bad effect on people than a good effect. Can you imagine?
Interesting.
A majority of people who vote Republican are against college. Now, do I think college is for everybody? No. Do I think lots of people can benefit from it? Yes. Do I think everybody who goes to college benefits from it? Not necessarily. But overall, to not believe in education, and the reason it's obvious, because all polls show the more educated you are, the more likely you are to be more liberal. And so, Fox News, their newscasters all went to college. Right-wing Republican legislators and Congress people, they're all putting out this message: oh, college isn't good for you. Oh, college. Oh, they're so liberal. Oh, liberal bias. And what they're really doing is denigrating the idea of education. That's horrible.
Well, and don't you think they're probably trying to keep their base, for lack of a better term.
That's all they're doing.
They're trying to keep them stupid.
They're keeping their base stupid because they'll keep voting for them.
Exactly.
Isn't that sad?
It's very sad. But going back to...
I never voted for a party because that's the educated party, that's the uneducated party. I want both parties to have good ideas, to really debate. Best advice, best thing I ever heard on our show was back at the Crack House. Mm-hmm. So it was years ago. Harriet Earhart, former state representative, was on our show. And we were talking about legislation and her experiences in the legislature. And she said, the best legislation we ever got was when both sides sat down and talked to each other. And when we talked and had a real discussion, we ended up with a bill that helped more people.
Makes sense to me.
Now, that's being a real legislator. She didn't abandon her views. She didn't suddenly become Miss Conservative, ever. I mean, she was districted out of her own district because they couldn't stand her liberal views. But she was always smart enough, bright enough, and concerned enough with helping more people that while her constituency something might help, she'd listen to the other side, and if we can put that in too, and more people are helped, more people benefit, whatever the legislation is, that's better legislation.
Mm-hmm. I going back to some of these pastors like Jeffers, I wonder what their congregation, what do they think when they hear him say stuff like this?
Oh, I think they think he's brilliant.
I mean, seriously, do you really believe that?
I think they think he's brilliant. I really do. For every one that he loses for some of these things, he gains 5.
Wow.
They're looking for that type of pastor who is just, he doesn't look at the world around him, doesn't look at what's going on, doesn't look at what's best for everybody, it's what's best for me. Joel Osteen, he's a wonderful example. We need to take a break.
I was going to bring him up.
We'll get
to him.
Back to him right after this break. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis. Everybody else from our show has abandoned us today.
They did.
Poor Lerone and me. We'll be back with more right after this.
This is Genetics with Jonathan's Place, and you're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 KNON FM.
And this is Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis. We're doing an impromptu show. No guests. We had some guests scheduled. No Patti. We had a Patti scheduled, but she's on the Gulf Coast doing relief work in the French Quarter at a bar on Bourbon Street that needed hers and Aaron's help.
Absolutely. So, by the way, we're talking about Harvey and its effects. And it has affected us, too. Do you have a full tank of gas?
Yeah, do you know, I put gas in, I think on Tuesday or Wednesday. It had gone up to $2.29 a gallon. I noticed that same gas station the next day was $2.39 a gallon. By Friday, it was $2.59 a gallon. By the time they ran out of gas that night, it was $2.69 a gallon. And everywhere, local news media is reporting gas is up 10 cents a gallon. Are they out of their minds? I saw it as high as 2.79 cents a gallon. To me, that's a 70-cent gas price increase. It's completely artificially inflated. There are gas supplies. They're just not delivering. We have full oil tanks all around this area. They're not in Houston. People coming out of Houston said they had no problem getting gas in Houston. You would think gas tanks would be flooded, but I guess they're sealed enough, and the pump is out of the ground. The gas stations that were not underwater, people could get to plenty of gas. They said there was plenty of gas along the way coming up on I-45. It's not till you get close to Dallas that there's a complete shortage. It's completely artificial. Why would you do this? Well, what was the price at the beginning of the week? $2.09. Because when I bought at $2.29, it had gone up to $2.29, but I got last week at the end of the week at $2.09. How much is it now? $2.79. How much did it increase in cost to store that fuel? Was it a 70 cent per gallon extra fee because it rained? I don't think so.
No, I don't think
This is
so.
artificial. The price increase is artificial. So some people said, well, how are they making money if stations are closed? Well, if there's one station closed and that same gas company has a station a few blocks away and there's a line around the block and they're selling it 70 cents more, I don't think the oil company cares one way or the other whether the hell you are standing on line for an hour or 2 hours if you're spending 70 cents per gallon more, and most people are putting 10 gallons in their tank would be average.
Yeah.
That's average. I have an 18-gallon tank because I have an SUV that sips gas. But if you're putting 10 gallons times, that's an extra $7 per purchase once every 5 minutes. Multiply it times 10 gas tanks or whatever. Sounds to me like gouging.
You think?
There were certain companies that were called out for gouging, like Best Buy, one of the stores in Houston.
I saw that.
Now, they're saying that was an accident.
They apologized.
But did they start giving away water? We're talking about a national company that can afford a few $100s worth of however much water was in that store. Give it away. Other people are helping.
Right.
Everybody's talking about mattress.
There's a mattress store down in Houston.
What's his name? Mattress Mac?
I don't
Mattress
know
Mike?
what it is. It might be
That's
Mike.
That's his nickname.
He opened a store and let people come in and sleep on the beds.
Oh, it was more than that. He was feeding everybody.
Yeah,
they said it was costing him $30,000 a day.
Yeah.
A day to house people with no end in sight at that point. I don't think people are still in his store, but they were for about a week.
They were and mind you, this isn't some national mattress
No,
firm.
he has two stores.
Exactly.
He has two, and he can do that. And Best Buy. Yeah, Best Buy. When I say it, Best Buy, Big Lots, they come out the same, and I'm always mixing them up, and I know the difference. Best Buy is gouging, selling a case of water for the one bottle price. Really? Mm-hmm. You're not contributing anything to your community at all? Do you know how much money you're going to be making with people who have to replace all of their electronics? What's one of the first things that happens when your things are flooded?
Yeah, the electronics get shorted out.
And how much are the new iPhones? $1,000
each?
And you're worried about a bottle of water and the price that you're selling? That's just gouging. That's just horrible.
So,
that guy, I'm so glad every single national news show featured him. He deserves it.
And I hope his business explodes after this.
I do too. Because all the furniture that's in his store, he's going to have to sell it at.
Yeah.
So he's going to have to replace everything. Mm-hmm. I'm not worried about him because I was even thinking, okay, next time I need any furniture, that's where I'm going.
So,
wouldn't you do that?
Absolutely.
We've had some wonderful people locally who've made some efforts. Karen McCrocklin, who was on our show a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. What was Karen talking about? It was a pledge drive show, and she was just on chatting.
Just on chatting. We were just talking about a bunch of different news items.
So Karen, she did this last year when there were floods in Baton Rouge, where she drove relief supplies down to Baton Rouge, and she learned a lot from that. So she got a U-Haul, and she's been filling the U-Haul with all kinds of things that down there is asking for. Not used clothes, not all kinds of stuff that they don't want. But she's bringing money and a number of items that specifically organizations have said they needed. She'll drive them directly to those organizations. She did that on, I think it was Monday, she was going. Last Friday, though, she got a donation of a boat. So she drove a boat down. No, I think it's this coming Monday she's driving these supplies down. On this past Thursday or Friday, she drove the boat down. She had somebody specifically who needed the boat. She drove it, she dropped it off, and she brought some evacuees back with her.
Awesome.
Now, that's somebody who is above and beyond It was just, what can I do to help?
Right.
Okay, so we were talking about these pastors who, during a disaster, are busy making a name for themselves by giving stupid, unhelpful quotes, by people who are blaming the mayor. You know, and the mayor's point was, you can't evacuate 6 million people.
You really can't.
When they evacuated 10 years ago during a different hurricane that wasn't as strong, all of the deaths were on I-45 in accidents on the way up, and not as many people evacuated. You can't evacuate that many people. The other thing that people who are blaming him for, well, you didn't tell me to evacuate. You can only drive up to Dallas. Dallas is telling you that they have evacuation shelters. Dallas is telling you that we are welcoming thousands of people. If you need a place to stay, you can stay here. You need the mayor to tell you whether or not you should go?
But it wasn't just Dallas. I mean, there's 2 other major cities that go to Houston.
Fort Worth is doing the same thing.
Austin, San Antonio.
All of them. All of them. I'm just using Dallas because I know what we set up for here. And we set up for at least 10,000 evacuees. Most of them that are down at the convention center actually were evacuated from Orange and the Orange, Port Arthur, Beaumont area, which was completely underwater.
So you know how you were saying that most of it of the flood was in North Houston. Well, parts of North Houston were, I don't want to say fine, but they did not experience the flood.
Well, because the hills start north of Houston. So if you're on higher ground, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, and so one of those buildings I'm very familiar with used to be called the Summit. That's where the Houston Rockets used to play. We used to go there all the time when I was a kid.
That's just a little bit west of downtown.
Now that the Summit is no longer, but the building is still there, and now it is home of the church,
Lakewood Church.
The Lakewood Church. It's basically an arena. Think of a Reunion Arena. Think of American Airlines. It's an arena, and it's now a church.
It was about the size of Reunion.
Yeah, it's 16,000 people. So now it's a church, and I guess they needed to be asked before they opened their doors. What do you think about that?
Yeah, Joel Osteen's excuse for not opening his doors to evacuees or to people who were desperate for a place was, well, it was underwater. So people walked up to the church
and filmed it, and it was practically dry.
And then his excuse was, well, our doors were never locked. And there are videos all over the internet of their doors that were locked.
And then the third excuse was, well, Houston never asked us for help.
Now, if you're an organization that's that big and there's disaster going on around you, it didn't take the mattress store, they didn't have to be asked. They just opened their doors because they knew there were people in their neighborhood that needed a place to stay and needed food. So he went out. He had a lot less access to food than other people did. Another excuse, we don't have kitchen facilities here. You think the mattress store had kitchen facilities?
Exactly.
The mattress store that sheltered several hundred people. Several hundred. Can you imagine? It's a big furniture store. It's not like he's this little tiny retail. Big furniture store. But he has several hundred people. Our rec centers that opened for evacuees before the convention center are rec centers. Each held several hundred people. So if you imagine one of our rec centers, I'm sure his store is about that size. He doesn't have kitchen facilities. Yes, I'm sure he has a microwave, probably a refrigerator.
And probably a little coffee pot. That's about it.
Gee, somehow he managed, and he fed people 3 times a day. We don't have the kitchen facilities. Well, figure it out.
First of all, that's a lie. That's a lie. That church has... Again, this used to be an arena. It's still an arena, technically. I'm sure they didn't get rid of the kitchen facilities that were there.
You mean the old Pizza Hut or whatever else that used to be in the arena?
Exactly. The McDonald's or whatever else. All those food shops. Yeah, I'm sure.
Now, to be fair, the arena has been remodeled.
It has been remodeled.
Like millions of dollars of remodeling.
Right.
I believe they don't have banquet facilities in that church. And they don't do, well, do they do weddings there? If they do, they have some kind of kitchen facility. Do they do, and if not, there a church that doesn't do weddings?
I just find it hard to believe that a church that size
has no kitchen
facilities.
None.
And they don't do any type of gatherings that don't include food. I'm not buying it.
There are ways around that, like you have cooking big pots that you heat up with a little portable heater. We're not talking about banquet facility cooking like you're catering a dinner. These people have been flooded out of their homes.
Right.
Figure out a way. Well, the city just wanted us to be a distribution point. Okay, let's get back to Pastor Jeffress. Why is he never asked to do anything? Because they know there are going to be strings attached. They know it's going to be something, it's going to be all about them. Why wasn't Joel Osteen asked to do anything more than be a distribution and collection point? We'll collect diapers and we'll distribute them. Because I'm sure they knew better. From Mattress Mac, that's what it is, Mattress Mac, I think.
Okay.
They knew that they'd get real help without having to ask, without having to instruct, they just knew, here's somebody who'll take care of a few hundred people.
It's.
I hope he loses his entire congregation over this, but what?
He won't.
You know that his congregation is behind him. Well, we weren't asked.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though it was members of his own congregation that were flooded out.
I mean, exactly. It's like when Katrina hit New Orleans. Did they wait to ask to open the Superdome? No, they opened it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see any fancy.
Do you know what I saw on there? Do you know what I saw under a story about them in the Houston Chronicle? One person had written, and it was more than one that wrote this, something to the effect of, well, look what happened to the Superdome after all those people trashed it. They were more worried about what their church would look like afterwards than they were about helping people. To me, that's not religion.
No.
To me, that's the example of what religion isn't. And I hate to be trashing religion because I can only use the Jewish example, and I don't mean this, Jews good, Christians not. There were lots of churches that did this too, but I have several examples. Temple Beth Israel, I think, in Houston, is the largest synagogue in Houston. They had water damage. You know what they did? They opened the part of the building that didn't have water damage. Didn't take a rocket scientist,
right,
although they have a number of rocket scientists in that congregation,
sure
because NASA is just south of Houston. They do have kitchen facilities, probably not to feed the number of people that were coming in, although they do weddings there. Apparently they don't at Lakewood Church. They do weddings so they can do big catering, but they're not equipped to do 24-hour around-the-clock catering.
Right.
And cooking. They figured it out. They housed a couple of hundred people, or however many, maybe 100, from their neighborhood.
It doesn't take like you said, a rocket science. You're just trying to get people to safety, first and foremost. Think about the food and water later. We're trying to get these people from drowning, get them to safety, get them to a dry place. And I know what's so hard about that.
I don't know, but apparently it was very difficult.
So what about the relief? There's been a lot of relief from nationwide, a lot of celebrities donating money and so forth. But now I'm starting to see some specific relief donated to certain groups.
And we're running out of time, but I did just want to mention, Mayor Turner formed the Greater Houston Community Foundation fund, and it's ghcf.org/hurricane relief. The Texas Diaper Bank they're asking for donations of diapers and cash, TexasDiaperBank.org, and the North Texas Food Bank, which is our food bank up here in Dallas. They're asking, or if you're over in Fort Worth, I can't think of the name of the Fort Worth Food Bank, but we have two separate ones. Donate there. If you donate to North Texas Food Bank, ntfb.org, what these food banks do is, it's not just, let's take advantage of a situation down south and give to us up north. It's that the different food banks share their resources. So if there's a shortage of some item and we've gotten it here, or if you make a donation through the North Texas Food Bank for South Texas relief, it will go there. I mean, they're just a wonderful organization. So you can make those kinds of donations, but local relief and relief to specialized organizations like black organizations, Hispanic organizations, gay organizations. Let's talk about that right after the break. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. I'm Dave Taffet, here in the studio with Lerone Landis, and we'll be back with more right after this.
I'm Patti Fink, and you're listening to Lambda Weekly on KNON 89.3 FM.
And thank you, Patti, who isn't here. She's doing hurricane relief in New Orleans. I think she had that planned long before the hurricane. But she's the only relation to her and flood relief is she's drinking a hurricane. So anyway, but local organizations like the big one in Houston is Montrose Clinic. Their website is montroseclinic.org, I believe. I can double check it while you're vamping.
Well, I just thought it was interesting. There's these different organizations, or not necessarily organizations, but different groups that are receiving aid for the black community, for the Hispanic community, for the LGBT community. And when you're seeing all this money being raised on TV, you're thinking, okay, it's just going to go to anybody and everybody in the city of Houston who needs it. Why the need for the separation?
And by the way, it's montrosecenter.org.
Okay.
Montrose, M-O-N-T-R-O-S-E, Center. How stable are they? They've been around since 1978, so they predate the AIDS crisis. They're Houston's big LGBT organization. The comparable organization would be Resource Center here. They're the community center. They're the counseling center. There are a couple of others down there. The other big one, though, is Legacy. It has nothing to do with our Legacy up here, but Legacy, and one of their clinics, one of Legacy's clinics sustained some major damage. Both organizations doing fine. Didn't look like Montrose was flooded, but what do they offer? Well, counseling. And when I called it Montrose Counseling Center, that was the original name of it. They offer counseling specific to the LGBT community, specific to people with HIV. Are they open to other people? Yes. AIDS medication.
That's a big one.
A number of medications have to be refrigerated. Well, if you've lost your medication because it was flooded, because you didn't get it together quick enough, or your month's prescription is out, and you rely on your pharmacy to deliver to you, guess what? There are no deliveries. You had no way to get there. Well, they're arranging to get medications to people who need the medications.
And now, very expensive medications, might I add.
Oh, sure. That's covered.
Right.
There are grants, there are other things that cover the cost of medication. The ADAP program, that's what the ADAP program does. It makes sure that people who need these medications have viral suppression so that the AIDS epidemic is not spreading. The idea is to contain it. But if you've lost your refrigeration, certain medications you can't take. They have to be refrigerated. If you've just lost your medication and needed gotten to you, and you're in, say, a shelter at the Brown Convention Center in Houston, or you're wherever you are, they will try to get you that medication. So there are specific needs within the community that the Red Cross, I'm not at all criticizing what the Red Cross does, that's not what they do.
Right.
What were some of the things you read about in the black community or Hispanic community?
Actually, I did not read the details. I just saw the headlines, and I was wondering. I did hear one thing, that sometimes communities of color are ignored. Sometimes some communities of color, the people don't have access to get to where the Red Cross is actually donating and so forth. So then I guess there needs to be money raised that targeted those certain neighborhoods.
The Red Cross, I don't want to say only...
And I don't mean just a single-out Red Cross.
No, but that's the big national organization that's doing the hugest amount of good in Houston. But I've seen them, like if an apartment complex burns down, they'll be there providing... helping people find housing for the night, providing just blankets or coats or whatever if it's cold outside, providing something to drink just for something immediate, but helping people find a place to sleep for that night is one of the big things. That's what they'll do if there's one apartment complex. This is a whole city, and it was beyond the city. It was into the suburbs and then the path all the way into Louisiana. They're not going to be on every street corner. They can't be. And people can't necessarily, like you said, get to where they are.
Right.
The local organizations, and the other thing is, within a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, the Red Cross presence will diminish in Houston. Montrose Clinic, Montrose Center, is going to be there this year, next year, the year after, and these funds will help them with their needs.
And help them rebuild whatever.
Help them rebuild, help them with whatever. Same thing in the black community, in the Hispanic communities. In the Hispanic community, well, maybe they get FEMA money, but they need somebody to help them translate so the application to get it in so that they can get recovery money. In the black community, like you said, some communities are ignored. Well, it might not be the federal money that's being ignored or denied to them, but they can't find who's going to help me rebuild my house. And so in a community, they'll have people who will help connect them to, somebody who has a house that's been in their family for generations. They just don't have the same access to certain... How do you rebuild a house? Well, they've never rebuilt a house because they've lived in the same house for generations. We have, that's part of the problem that Omar Narvaez was talking about with the houses in West Dallas. Some of those people have lived in those houses for generations. They're being priced out of their houses because of taxes. Not that the property's any better at all, but because a few blocks away we've decided that we want restaurants and we'd like your property to be our parking lot. Well, that's a problem. But those kinds of things, caring for the special needs that special communities have, there are neighborhood organizations in Houston that are going to need help. For anybody who's listening why just the LGBT community? Well, because we've organized. Why the black community? Because they've organized. Well, what about neighborhood associations that just help geographical areas regardless of whatever? And I don't know of a gay organization who's ever turned anybody away because they're straight. That's also beside the point. But neighborhood organizations are going to need help, in banding together if they hire, say, a roofer, if a number of roofs have been destroyed. So they'll hire a roofer who can go down the street and up and down the street and for a better price get roofs done right in this neighborhood. There are all kinds of ways. So helping community organizations, I think, is the way to go and to watch over the coming months just how they're helping and which organizations. The gay community in Houston basically, and this is rare for Houston, I shouldn't say that because I'm sure there are people from Houston up here listening, for the gay community is relying on that Montrose Center fund. And the money is not just for Montrose Center, it's for the LGBT community. And so good fund, good organization. They've been around since the 70s, and well-run group. Yeah. It's not going to be to pad their pockets to build a bigger building. They already have a very large building where a number of services are housed. It's it's a good organization. Trump was in Houston twice this week.
He was. He also donated $1 million of his own personal money. Now, he's a billionaire. He brags about being a billionaire all the time. Should we be happy, or it's like, oh, that was nice of him, or should we have expected more?
You know, I'm on the side of I'm going to cut him slack in this one.
Okay.
I was thinking more. You know, he made $1 million donation. He wasn't required to do that.
Of course not.
He's the first president since Kennedy. Kennedy just refused his salary. Trump is donating his salary. So there's enough wrong with that man to criticize. So I don't want anything I'm about to say to sound like much of a compliment because he needs to be gone.
Yes.
However, he donated $1 million. I'm never going to criticize somebody who donates $1 million to relief efforts. You know, most celebrities, Jamie Foxx is organizing this because he's from Terrell. He's asking celebrities to each donate $25,000. You know, so put it in perspective, it would be 400 celebrities for Trump's one donation. So I'm not criticizing that at all. It was very nice of him to do. I was watching CBS Morning News or Face the Nation this morning, and one of the commentators, I think, hit it right on the head. He wasn't born with the compassion gene. So when he got to Corpus, which I do want to point out that visiting Corpus to see the floods that were in Houston, Corpus is a little bit farther from Houston than Dallas is. And most people don't realize that.
People don't realize that.
Because you think the Gulf Coast, Dallas is about 240 miles from downtown Houston. Corpus is about 250 miles.
Yeah.
So it's farther away. He did not see destruction. But that's okay. If he came to Texas to talk to Texas officials about what was going on and what the federal government's response should be, maybe I'm giving him too much credit here, but if that was the purpose of that trip, then it was a mistake for the White House communications office to frame it as he's coming to see devastation, because he wasn't. But it is right for him to have come to talk to federal officials, to state officials about what do you need, what should the federal government's role be. Let's get to know each other. You know, new president doesn't know 50 governors, doesn't know 500 mayors. You know, so meet Mayor Turner, meet the governor, and you can work together better once you've met each other. So I don't even criticize him for that. His response when he got off the plane, oh, what a great crowd.
Yeah.
Always thinking of himself. I don't think in this case it was necessarily for any other reason than this man is a horrible communicator. He has no compassion, no empathy. The $1 million, he understands how to do the right thing. You don't get, and here's your criticism, I think, it didn't come from the heart. If another president who was a good speaker followed up a compassionate speech with, Michelle and I decided to, you know, I'm just any president, but Michelle and I decided to donate $1 million to this relief effort, he would have gotten all the credit in the world for doing that. And I'm not saying his wealth is the same as Trump's wealth is, but to me, this was a good example of no compassion, no real inner compassion, no ability to communicate and to heal, no ability to really connect with people in a violent way. Oh, yeah, go whatever. Yeah, they could shoot me on Fifth Avenue and I wouldn't lose it. That kind of thing. People who have that mentality connect with. But when something's wrong, this is more he just doesn't have that skill.
Right.
But I'm not going to hold it against him. The second visit, just a few days later, you know, he couldn't get to Houston on that first visit because there were floods, and he really would have been in the way had he been there. Didn't fly over it though either. And maybe that's what people wanted, that in the helicopter, and yeah, I'll be back in a few days and we can do something. But they did come back. Oh, and she was criticized for the shoes she was wearing. You know what?
And in her defense, she only wore the shoes as she was leaving the White House. Once they actually landed, she had a totally different...
She had on sneakers, actually.
She had on sneakers.
You know
so
what?
I know the media was, or not necessarily the media, but people on social media were quick to jump on that. But that's petty.
Did she trip or hurt herself in those shoes? No.
No.
She's fine. I don't care what she's wearing.
Yeah, that's my point. It's petty. I could care less what she's wearing.
I don't think the reason for those visits was, as much as I'm saying he doesn't have the compassion gene, I don't think there was anything personal in it other than he learned from George Bush's mistakes during Katrina not to do those things, and he didn't. Other than, oh, what a great crowd. To me, that was just stupid.
I don't... Well, it's kind of like you said, but I don't think he really knows anything else to say.
You know, and that's kind of why I'm hesitating.
He probably thinks he's probably spreading, I don't know, love and trying to lift people up, but that's not going to do it.
Yeah, you know, people coming to see me. People coming to see me is such a good thing that I lifted all these poor people's spirits here, even though we're 250 miles away from the hurricane. But you know, I lifted their spirits. They came to see me, so I did a good thing. I don't think. Here's the other part about it. That didn't do any harm. Here's what did do some harm, and will be doing a lot of harm. Is now he wants to do away with the DACA program, the deferred action for...
We talked about that last week.
And we did talk about it last week. But that will do lots of harm to a lot of, not just people, to lots and lots of families. So...
But supposedly...
But hey, a big crowd. Okay, so he's just a dope. I wish that was the worst thing I could say about him and about this administration.
Right.
And it's not, so.
Yeah. Well, and supposedly he's rethinking how much he wants to dial back the DACA program.
I mean, what they're thinking is that he's going to use that as a negotiating tool to get his damn wall.
That makes sense.
You know, art of the deal.
Yeah.
Which he hasn't shown much art at using yet, but you know, if it's a deal maker, deal breaker to build the wall, but we'll let immigrants stay. But you know, anyway, we're out of time. You've been listening to Lambda Weekly on the fly.
Very much so.
Lambda Weekly, the Hurricane Show.
Exactly.
We'll be back next week with more Lambda Weekly. Our guest is, I forgot.
And I forgot too.
Yeah, okay. But we do have...
Is it the two dads from...
No.
Okay, it's not them.
No.
Okay.
That one I haven't scheduled yet.
Okay, I thought you did.
No, I need to schedule that one. We're just having our after-show conversation here. We'll be back with more Lambda Weekly next week.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.